All right, welcome everyone for this week's edition of a Peace Roundtable. This is, I believe, number 8 in an ongoing series, a venture that Ed and I began some months back, and I think this is a pretty good forum as far as something to just focus the minds on both the causal nexus of the problems challenging humanity, but also with a look towards solutions, with a look towards the future. Because in the present, if people get too locked into the conditions of the present, we find that there are often there's often a space for a lot of cynicism, a lot of myopia, and an inability to sort of think through creatively what are the pathways for a future that actually has a humanity. So as of last week, we began a new, I guess you could call it a brand with the Academy for International Cooperation. It's something which is a space we're creating. We don't exactly know what this is going to look like. Obviously, we would like to shape a bit more of a thorough curriculum to really cultivate the minds of people who could become qualified diplomats, leaders, people able to make the wise types of decisions that we don't have enough of, especially in this basket case transatlantic West, which is a little bit too drunk on certain delusional ideas of the end of history and hegemony. And we need to really shake that off and get back to our better traditions. So that's one of the aspects. Today we have several very, very fantastic speakers. I'm very, very excited. It's the last roundtable of the year with a look towards an assessment of where we are and what dangers and hopes we have going into 2025. We have Ed Lozansky, obviously, who's going to say the opening remarks. We'll also have Harley Schlanger from the Schiller Institute, who is going to share his considerations, followed by Larry Johnson and Alex Krainer. So it's going to be a very, very fun experience. I got my notebook ready. I'm going to open it up for Dr. Edward Lozansky to speak first, and then following that, we'll have the other speakers. And then after that, a little short dialogue with the audience. So, Ed, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, I try to be very brief. And first of all, I want to thank everyone who joined in this group. It's a really great time to start on Sunday this discussion. The only thing which some people told me is that we have to think a little bit about timing, because some of those people who really want to join, this is time they go to church. And it's very important, of course, and that's why maybe we will, next year when we resume, we have to think, maybe some suggestion from you, what's the best. The reason we actually picked Sunday was because we wanted to attract young people, and young people during the week, they are busy with their classes, schedules, and so we thought maybe on Sunday it will be easier. So far, as you know, we have a very excellent group, not too many young people. So this is something we have to work hard on this. But timing also, because it conflicts with church, maybe this is food for thought. We don't have to talk about and decide now, just simply think about it. Now, I think that there's some good news and bad news. Bad news that the war in Ukraine is still going on. Every day we have more like incidents. And just last week, and some of the incidents can really escalate, and no one else but President-elect Trump is saying this. Whatever we think of Trump, and we can always find some things to criticize, and we should, but there's no one else at this point. He is president-elect, and many things will depend on him, whether he can this time beat the deep state, which ruined his presidency first time. And what he's saying now, gives us some hope. He promised to end this war 24 hours after the election. Of course, this was like a campaign slogan, because it's already not just 24 but hours. It's 24 days probably after, no, a little less, but maybe let's say it will be 24 hours after January 20. And I yesterday had some interviews, and I said that maybe he will make this phone call on January 21st to Putin, and this process will begin. But still, we have today, it's December 15. It means 16 more days in December and 20 in January. Total 36 days. 36 days, every day something horrible can happen. So since we've talked about church at the beginning, let's pray that nothing happens.
Without further ado, let's open it up with Harley and hear Harley's thoughts. I know he's got a very good take on the world with a very positive outlook. So but also a very good understanding of the dangers. So I'd like to hear Harley first for the first 20 minutes, and then we can go on to Larry and then Alex. Harley, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. You hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Well, thank you, President Lozansky, Matt, fellow speakers. Thanks for the invitation today, and I hope to bring some interesting ideas in the process. My topic today will be why the plan of the Anglo-American Empire to sustain their beloved unipolar order, while clever and seemingly successful to some extent at the moment, is doomed to fail. I spent many years in the south of the United States and a lot of time observing the unique culture of that region, particularly Texas. In addition to coming to understand the peculiar biblical interpretation of the Christian Zionists, I picked up a bit of what was allegedly folk wisdom. For example, the saying, "Man plans and God laughs," comes to mind. While I don't believe that's true, as the advance of human civilization testifies to the role of human creativity in improving the conditions for mankind as a whole, I believe it is true when applied to those would-be gods of Olympus, members of the Western oligarchy who arrogantly believe in their special powers, which allow them to rule over the majority of mankind. This belief in their right to establish the rules governing all nations has been there for centuries in a succession of empires, but it was inscribed in a special way in the doctrine introduced at the end of the 19th century as geopolitics. Mackinder's formulations about the pivot, the heartland, the rim nations, etc., were nothing but a justification for rule of the British Empire. It was propagated among American establishment figures at the Versailles Conference to recruit them to be a part of the post-war Anglo-American Empire, and has served as the basis, often unspoken, of that establishment ever since. After World War II, as the British were facing losing their empire, they settled for the role of being a junior partner to the United States, but internally adopting the comforting idea that the world will still be ruled by British brains and American brawn. This held up during the Cold War, but the US establishment increasingly asserted their own power after the collapse of the Soviet Union as the sole superpower and the world hegemon. In its new phase, we saw the emergence of those who came to be known as neocons and the creation by the likes of Paul Wolfowitz, the Kagan family, Richard Pearl, and others, of such institutions as the Project for the New American Century. As a quick aside, let me assert that this was not new. It was there in different ways in Kissinger's geopolitical outlook and the twisted logic of Zbigniew Brzezinski, the two whose spawns are leading voices for the empire today. Let me note Kissinger's admission at Chatham House in May 1982 that for him, the special relationship meant working from British Foreign Office papers and keeping them better briefed than his own staff. As for the present administration, the line passed from Brzezinski to Madeleine Albright, then to Blinken and Sullivan. And the special relationship is still celebrated by members of the intelligence foreign policy establishment as virtually sacrosanct. The ultimate goal, as presented by Brzezinski in his global chessboard, is that the US must not allow another rival to emerge, especially not one linking Europe or Central Europe with Eurasia. With the end of the Cold War, the believers in this notion of American exceptionalism intended to reduce Russia to a minor regional player, or as one or more American officials said, whether it was McCain or Obama, I can't remember, Russia is a gas station with nuclear arms masquerading as a nation. The game plan for this in 1991 was to combine shock therapy economic policy to loot Russia's raw materials for the benefit of Western corporate and financial interests, and to simultaneously impoverish the nation by dismantling their science centers and industry, and combining that with NATO expansion to surround Russia with Western outposts of potentially hostile and well-armed proxies. The intent continued through the first 2 decades of the 21st century, regardless of which of the 2 branches of the Uniparty held the White House, Congress, or both. I'll not go through the decades of lies and manipulation of Western governments, which by 2021 had led to a complete breakdown of trust, punctuated by such events as the Bucharest and Budapest NATO spats, the Maidan regime change coup, the Minsk Accords, and the launching in 2022 of the special military operation. But one document which attests to this is the RAND report of April 24th, 2019, Extending Russia, Competing for Advantageous Ground. It opened by citing the 2018 National Defense Strategy paper, which stated that the US and Russia are, quote, locked in a great power competition, unquote. It presents a list of, quote, escalatory steps, unquote, the first 3 of which dealt with how to exploit what they called Russian vulnerabilities, including Ukraine, Syria, and Belarus. There's much more elaborated in this report, and I recommend it to anyone who's looking into this. It's one of a series of RAND reports which laid out a strategy of sustaining the unipolar order. But this brings us up to the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, and the SMO, Special Military Operation in Ukraine. This was provoked. There's nothing to the lie that it was unprovoked. It was provoked, especially by the refusal to negotiate security guarantees for Russia regarding NATO. And then after the February 22nd SMO was launched, the decision to arm Ukraine. We can also add the sabotage of negotiations by NATO through Boris Johnson and others as part of a continuing effort to keep the war going. Keep in mind what Lloyd Austin said after the creation of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group following the Ramstein meeting in April 2022. Quote, we want to see Russia weakened to the degree that it can't do these kinds of things it has done in Ukraine, unquote. Now, the point is, the West is losing Ukraine. There's nothing that can be done there. It cannot win there. But this is but one arm of a pincers operation, which is now clear given what happened in this last couple of weeks in Syria. Syria never was let up from the beginning of the Arab Spring and the deployment of Islamic militias to destroy the Assad government. The idea of a lightning strike, well, it was a lightning strike that took place over 23 years. These pincers include, 1, US support for the Israeli assault on Gaza and the West Bank. 2, the decapitation and decimation of Hezbollah. 3, the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, attacks on Syria and Iran, all 3 with full support of the United States. You can add to that the US Caesar sanctions and the holding on to oil and wheat fields in northeast Syria, which impoverished the country. And keep in mind the statement from Jake Sullivan from 2012, when he said in an email to Hillary Clinton, Al-Qaeda is on our side. And 2 weeks ago, Sullivan said, we will not shed tears for the Assad regime. Now, at the same time, we have the US escalation in Ukraine with the decision to use the long-range missile attacks and bring along the junior partners of France and Great Britain to coordinate with us. Then you have the question of Turkey, supporting, arming, and training the Islamists. So this culminated in the events of the last 2 weeks, the so-called lightning collapse of the Assad government, with the West gleefully telling neutral or pro-Russian states that Russia and Iran sold out Assad and they'll do the same to you. As I said, it's a clever plan, a global great game 2.0. But here's why it won't work. There are 2 major problems. The first is that this is happening out in the open. The US support for genocide in Palestine is evident every time there's a UN Security Council discussion of the situation there. Combine that with the weaponizing of the dollar against any country that rejects the unipolar order. You can look at Iraq and Libya as examples. Add to that the failure of the sanctions to collapse Russia. We were told that would be a slam dunk policy, that Russia would be too weak to fight back. Instead, what we're seeing is the emergence of the BRICS, Putin's Eurasian perspective, the idea of linking security to economic development. And as a result, a viable alternative to the collapsing unipolar order is emerging, with support from an emboldened leadership in the global South, which is still being shaped. Now, for those who say, look, what about currency, the new currency, this and that? Putin's clear on this. It's going to take some time. They're working on it. It's open to other so-called partners, including the US and Europe, but they're going ahead. This is the tectonic shift that Putin spoke about first at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum last year. And leaders in the global South are finding their voice. For example, Dr. Naledi Pandor, the former foreign minister of South Africa, said to Blinken when he came to lecture her on being more democratic, Pandor said to him, "Let me remind you, Secretary Blinken, we are a sovereign nation. Please don't think you can come here and tell us what we should do." This is a new anti-colonial movement which is emerging in Africa, in Asia, and South America. Now, the relation of economic development to security is what the Schiller Institute has been promoting as the idea of the new paradigm, a new security and development architecture. Now, secondly, simultaneously, the reason they can't win is the collapse of the governments in the West submitting to the unipolar order. Excuse me. Germany and France are exhibits A and B. Let us not forget the crushing defeat of the Biden-Harris warhawks by Trump. The exposure of the hypocrisy of the fake paradigm from the Atlantic Council of freedom and democracy versus authoritarianism is also on display. Look at Romania as a prime example. So as on the collapse in the West, let me just give a brief hint at the cause of the strategic failure with the defense policy and economic policy. The unipolar order has depended on militarizing economies. For example, with the German budget crisis, we can no longer in this country afford schools, healthcare, infrastructure, and at the same time becoming war ready. The idea that you can have a budget deficit is outlawed by the European Union policies. On top of that, the West is already behind Russia in such things as hypersonic missile technology. As for the economy, the West has been skating by due to imperial looting of the colonial sector and the financialization of the West, which is piling up unsustainable deficits. The US election turned due to the rejection of the uptalk of the Biden economy. It was not racism, misogyny, extremism, or any of these other ideas which drew voters to Trump. It was the difficulty of family households to put food on the table, cover medical, housing, and transportation expenses, which led to the Trump victory. So now we have, as Professor Lozansky pointed out in less than 60 days, Donald Trump in the White House. We have a chance to end the war. It's going to require not waiting for Trump, but a mobilization of citizens in support of that policy. So I hope I didn't try to cram too much in too short a time, but I look forward to questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Harley. That was a very, very solid, sobering overview. And I think that sets the stage very well for, let's go with Larry. Larry Johnson, we didn't do a sound check. I'm hoping everything worked out. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I think can you hear me now? We'll do the telephone commercial.
All right, loud and clear, yes. And for those who don't, I think everybody knows who you are, and I don't think you need an introduction, but to make it formal, Larry is an impeccable geopolitical analyst. He's everywhere on the podcast circuit. He's been at this for a long time, a former CIA analyst, somebody who's been working with Ray McGovern and others on the Veterans of Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And really, really happy to have you on, Larry, and curious to see what your take is.
Okay, well, listen, not much to add to what Harvey presented. Let me just let me deal with attacking what I think are some assumptions, not Harvey's assumptions, but assumptions within the general public. Number one, I think there's an assumption that the government actually has a secret plan and knows what it's doing. Uh, in all of my experience, both during my time as a formal government employee and then in 23 subsequent years as a government contractor, I never saw such a thing. And it's best illustrated with, I worked on military exercises for the special operations community for Delta Force, SEAL Team 6. Now, the nature, if you've never been involved with a military exercise, what it entails is creating a scenario so that you can get the different components of the military communicate with each other, because that's how they move. So, for example, if you say, "Oh, there's a terrorist attack in Benghazi," so that news comes in, and then somebody within that food chain has to say, "Hey, we need to be prepared to do something. We're going to prepare to launch Delta Force," for example. So then the word would come down from the Secretary of Defense and through the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, telling the commander of Delta Force, "Get ready. Be prepared for this, and come back and tell us what you're prepared to do. What's your concept of operations?" So the entire purpose of these exercises is to both demonstrate that the people understand what they're supposed to be communicating back and forth, and then to show that they can actually do what they claim that they're trying to do. And then when you do a full-blown exercise where the people actually go out onto the tarmac of an airfield and get on a plane and move from point A to point B and either jump out of the plane at the end, whatever. At the end of all of these exercises, and I was involved with probably over 125 over a 23-year period, they have what's called a hot wash, lessons learned. And I remember my first year doing this, looking forward, saying, "Oh man, people are going to recognize where they screwed up and what they needed to do differently, and that we're going to be we'll build on knowledge, step on step." Oh, no, I learned that was wrong. There's no learning that goes on. Nobody ever learns anything or remembers anything. It's like trying to teach an Alzheimer's patient how to play chess. So you get them down the first day with the pawn. Okay, come back the second day. They go, "What's that?" You go, "That's the pawn." The what? So, believe it or not, this is how bad. And you think, "Oh, well, that's just the military." No, it extends throughout the rest of the government. I back in 2003, 2004, right after we invaded Iraq for the second time, I was teaching. I helped teach the Senior Crisis Management Seminar for the U.S. Department of State's Anti-Terrorism Assistance Training Program. That program would bring the senior officials from one government to the United States for a week-long seminar on how to manage a crisis. And my job was to present the lecture on terrorism, and then the human rights lecture, don't pull out fingernails, don't waterboard people. And what was fascinating, because we were dealing with countries from South America, Central America, Africa, Middle East or West Asia, Asia, and they all had the same question. This surrounded the war in Iraq. Okay, they come up and say, what's your real plan? What is it that America's, we know that you've got a secret plan. They could not believe that we were really this dumb, that we didn't calculate that, okay, we're going to depose a Ba'athist ruler with Sunni roots and replace him with a majority Shia, and those Shia are going to have a relationship with Iran, and that's going to strengthen Iran. No, we never thought about that. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's a bad thing, but I'm just pointing out that's one of the dynamics that came out of this. And yet, to a person, all of these other countries assumed that the United States was operating according to some secret plan, and they're not. And that's what makes it so dangerous. There's, one of the latest illustration of that, I think, is all this furor that's being ginned up over these drones. Now, these drones are flying over some U.S. military bases, and they're flying in DoD airspace. Well, DoD has standing orders to shoot things down that aren't supposed to be there. So the fact that they're not getting shot down tells me somebody somewhere is conducting, whether it's an exercise, whether it's trying to gin up a false flag. I don't know what it is, but the government, there's somebody in the government that knows what's going on, but it's also highly likely that there may not have been any kind of communication to the rest of the government. Now, this brings us then to, I think, Harvey's broader point. The United States has been used to being in charge. We've been used to calling the shots. And that age has come to an end. We just don't realize it yet. We're sort of in the position of the proverbial chicken with its head cut off. Anybody that's ever been out on a farm in a rural area with that kind of chicken, they just run around until they fall over dead. And it sure seems to me that we're doing a lot of running around with lethality. I've characterized America as, we're a serial rapist that can't get off the dating apps, okay? And we're finding every other country, whether we're meddling in Georgia or Romania, certainly carrying out, offensive operations in Ukraine, even though we claim that we're not, enabling Israel to commit genocide. And all of this is in a bid that we've got to stop those empires of Russia and China. And again, I can't wrap my mind around how is it that the United States sees these imaginary empires being built up when between Russia and China, in terms of actual foreign military bases, they may have a total of 4 between them. And the United States has over 700. Maybe I've heard the number 750. That it's the United States dictating to other countries. I was fortunate to be at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in June, one of the few Americans there. And what's fascinating is watching how Russians treat foreigners. It is, from a governmental standpoint, there is not this assumption of superiority on the part of the Russians. They treat other countries without a patronizing attitude and treat them with respect. And, I saw it particularly among some of the African delegates. They're like, look at each other saying, hey, we're not being told what to do. We're being treated like we're intelligent human beings. So I think in this kind of transition phase, it's dangerous because the West, particularly the United States, doesn't want to lose its control, but it hasn't figured out what it can do to retain that control. Instead, all it can do is revert to its fundamental playbook, which is either we're going to impose economic sanctions on you and try to starve you out. We're going to conduct a color revolution and carry out covert activities through the CIA, or we're going to launch a war, or hey, we'll do all three. And unfortunately, I don't see a change in that pattern. I'm hoping that Trump will provide some disruption, but that's a bet I'm not willing to place yet.
Thank you, Larry. And I'm looking forward to the dialogue with the audience after formal remarks are finished. I certainly have a question, but I'll withhold. Alex, are you still there? Alex, if you are there, you're on mute.
Matt, I have a technical problem, so I need to exit here and re-enter from a laptop.
Oh,
So
Because we can hear
I
you
just
right
need.
now. We can hear you okay, even though we can't see you. But it's up to you.
Okay. Fine then. Let's try. Let's try it this way. So I wanted to, I wanted to change tack a little bit, because one of the major events that we are looking at this time is the accelerating collapse of Germany. And while we understand why this is going on, partly, uh, energy prices going up, sanctions on Russia, net zero investment, and all of these things, relatively little is understood about what made Germany the success that it has been over the years, over decades, in fact. So I wanted to get a little bit into that because I think that sets the model of future economic development that I think that the Western nations should explore and learn from, right? So up until about 10 years ago, Germany was world's number one exporting superpower, ahead of China. China overtook it only about 10 years ago. And contrary to what most people might assume, most of Germany's exports were not products from known and recognized brands like, Mercedes, BMW, Bosch, and so forth. More than 50% of German exports were products and services developed by Germany's burgeoning small and medium-sized enterprising. Well, once burgeoning small and medium-sized enterprises. And most of these companies are, businesses that you never heard of. But these businesses were the engine of German industrial dynamism. What Dr. Richard Werner explained in one of his lectures is that Germany was the home base of the world's largest number of hidden champions, the market leaders that occupied either the first, second, or third spot in the world as in terms of global market share for whatever product or service they made. Some 1,500 German firms qualified as market champions, so 1,500 firms. And for perspective, the distant second in this sense was the United States, with about 300 global champions. So the question is, how did Germany create 1,500 market champions? We've always heard stories about the excellence of German engineering and the well-educated and disciplined workforce and all this, but I think that these are generally tales for little children that miss the mark and don't really explain anything at all. As Richard Werner explained it, Germany's success lied in what was a 200-year, and it had a 200-year continuity in spite of having suffered through biblical crisis over the period. And this is the reason for this was her banking system, which was believed by many to have been the best in the world. As Michael Hudson also wrote extensively about, Germany had the largest number of banks in Europe, about 1,500 small local banks. Fully 70% of these banks were non-profit community banking institutions. Their core business was funding local, small, and medium-sized enterprises. They tended to have very close relationship with their clients and actively participated in their business development, helping them fund and organize their operations, finances, break into new markets, and network with one another and with similar businesses. It was not uncommon in Germany for local banking institutions to extend 100-year loans to their clients. So with ample funding, and favorable rates, family businesses could develop their products and services and find markets for them. The family's second and third generations, educated with advanced degrees in engineering and chemistry and biotechnology, could then refine and perfect the company's offerings, and in this way gain a competitive advantage over their rivals across the world, who did not benefit from such fertile and beneficial environment and could not confidently make long-term accommodations to the development of their business. So ultimately, creating a favorable environment for this small and medium-sized business development was small and medium-sized banking infrastructure. And these, so there was like a beneficial symbiosis between the financial services and the productive economy. This concept is actually fairly well understood, and the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche organization have written extensively about it, and I learned a great deal from reading their materials as well. And I think that this is one of the very important things to keep in mind as the world transform, that we might be able to understand how to develop the economies, move away from large state capitalist enterprise that across the world almost invariably favors military spending and warfare, and that we in this way try to create better future for the new generations and to build a prosperity, peace, and mutually beneficial trade. And I would wrap up my remarks at this point, and I will still log out and then try to log in on my laptop while.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, go for it. No, that was good, Alex. And I appreciated how all three presentations tackled different aspects of our current situation: geostrategic, historic, economic, which obviously one can't understand the political topography if we don't have an appreciation for what did a sane, competent way of thinking about banking and finance once look like, that we have lost touch with. If we want to get back our senses and become valid sovereign nation states once again, that will take time to earn the right to be considered valid sovereign nation states that are not under the sway of delusional concepts that might overly worship the idea of hegemony or the idea of bailing out too big to fail at the expense of the people and the people's interests. So this is going to be it's going to require an assessment, as Alex just went through, of what did we do when we were good, when we were building ourselves up into competence, such that we can then appreciate what we have done to destroy said competence and the ability to produce abundance and to wield our nation's interests for the people and for the community of nations as a whole. So very, very good. I'm glad that all three presentations happened the way they did. I'm sure people in the audience have a number of questions. I'm just going to mute one person here, which is a bit... Okay. I see that Rick has his hand up. Ed, did you want to say anything before we open up for Q&A?
Yes, I just wanted to finish what I started talking about and present you some good news. It will be like, for me, it was like a Christmas New Year present. And Alex, who just spoke, and I were frequent speakers at the Eurasian Economic Forum. It's called Verona, of course, city of Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare, Italian city. And there's a bank, Intesa, which is a headquarters in Verona. And they started this project a few years ago. It's called the Verona Economic Eurasian Economic Forum. So more or less, it sounds like Davos. Davos also, they call it world economy. And so Verona is kind of a little smaller than world. But Eurasia is still a pretty big chunk of this planet. And I call Verona, since I attended many of the sessions, Davos with human face. Davos with human face because, first of all, there's no fee. Can you imagine whenever the conference, you have to pay a fee. In Davos, it's, I don't know, tens of thousands, and big guys come, and sometimes atmosphere is not pretty friendly because everyone wants to show who is the boss, who is the big guy, who is the head of the table. And Verona Forum, it's just very friendly. And the agenda is almost the same as Davos, like prosperity, economy, cooperation, fine. But somehow this is, you can approach those all things differently. Whether you have someone, the big guy who, as Larry said, there's a big guy who tells you what to do, or there's just a round table and people talk about how we can help each other. It's what we call win-win. Anyway, the big, great news, which I frankly didn't expect, was that they decided with this group. I told them my presentation was about our group, what we're trying to do, our mission, and some of the people who were involved, and they offered to adopt us. No, it's good to be adopted by someone who is much bigger than we, because this forum, over 1,000 people take place from many countries, including, of course, the European, not so many Americans. My wife and I were only Americans at this event, but there were many Europeans, very friendly. Despite my criticism of U.S. foreign policy, they were pretty friendly. But this can be a really big jump next year. And what they asked me to do is to give them a list of our speakers. They already know about our mission, but they want to know who they are getting ready to adopt. And Matt and I prepared this list. My list is pretty long because I started my American university already 34 years. And during those years, I get so many people who spoke at my American university, and all major American universities were involved. I mean, not as administration, but professors. And I asked them if they were willing to continue this, and they agreed. It's a really long list. I hope they'll be impressed. I was waiting for this session before sending them this list, just to see if maybe we'll come up with some new ideas. But if next year we will start, and our group will have all those additional resources which Eurasian Economic Forum, Verona Forum, has. And so this is a big jump. So I consider this a great Christmas present, New Year, not only for myself, but all of us. Okay, so this is something that we have. They asked me to send this list of speakers and ideas on next week. So you all know my email. If you have anything to add, because I'll be sending them in a few days. The final, well, not final. I think I'm pretty sure that our list will grow, but at least what we have for today. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say, and Matt, it's all yours now.
Okay, thank you, Ed. And indeed, I shared, for those who don't know, a link to the Verona Eurasian Summit website, as well as Pluralia's website in the chat box, as well as in the description box under this video on YouTube and Odyssey when this goes up. So for people who do want to look more into these things, I've been highly impressed, and the board, the directors, the writers are people who have the most incredible experience in the diplomatic corps, within intelligence, within just the within life in ways that most people do not get to experience. So I really was quite impressed that this even exists in our day and age. So that's there again to check out. I'm seeing now a few people who have put their hands up. I saw Rick, I see Tony, I see Monty. So let's try to keep our questions short as possible. We have a very limited amount of time for today's session, and then whether you have a question directed for one speaker, say that person's name, or if you want to just open it up for anybody who spoke today, you could mention that too. Rick, go for it. Rick, are you there? Okay, I'm guessing you have a technical difficulty you have to work through. Monty?
Yes, thank you. Quick comment and a question directed towards Larry Johnson, talking about the idea of really no plans. They're walking around like chickens with their heads cut off. I was with the Army Corps of Engineers. I was a logistician. I also did plans and operations with emergency operations, contingency plans in Iraq, Afghanistan for various things. And one thing I observed is indeed the fact there is no plan. And it appears to me somehow back along the way, West Point, which the Army Corps of Engineers, basically they come out of West Point, they're good at engineering in one respect, but they've lost their capacity to really understand strategically operations for the benefit of like the North of American Water and Power Lines. They just can't comprehend anything anymore in relationship to a strategic picture of what needs to be done. So that's a question for Larry, if he would comment on that. And also, I would just endorse the idea that Ed put out this morning on an idea for maybe some kind of a movie script or thing to basically give an overview of what has happened to date. I think it has to be able to reach a mass audience. And I'd also, in line with that, recommend that people read Cynthia Chung's commentary today on Schiller and the Ghost Theory, which I really think plays into this idea about these magic tricks being played with fifth generational warfare and the whole usurpation of these various institutions and a change in our perception. So that's my comment and question.
Okay, let me, I think the United States actually does have a broad strategic goal, but absolutely no idea how to implement said strategy and bring it to fruition. And that's the strategic goal is to destroy Russia and to take full, complete control of the Russian natural resources. Given Russia's size and the status as the number one wealthiest country in the world in terms of those natural resources. I've used the analogy that the U.S. policy very much reflects that carnival game, whack-a-mole, where you stand in front of a board and whatever pops up, you frantically try to hit it, and then it goes down. And, let's take what's happening in Syria right now as an example. So CIA was up to its eyebrows with the Brits, working with the Turks and with the Israelis, and providing training and support to a terrorist group that we have. The leader of said group, Jelani, is on a rewards poster, like one of the ones posted on my wall behind me, offering $10 million. Give us this terrorist, it says, for $10 million. And yet at the same time, we're providing aid, training, and support. And the goal is saying, I think there were two objectives. One, get rid of Assad, because clearly Assad was the biggest threat to Israel. Not Islamic jihadists, heavens no. And yes, I'm being sarcastic. But the other was goes with this assumption that if we can get Russia bogged down in Syria, just like the Soviets were bogged down in Afghanistan, then that will weaken Russia. But nobody stopped to think through, hey, we're back in Turkey in this play, and Turkey's going to start to take control of most of northern Syria, as well as northeastern Syria, where the Kurds are. Now, we've given commitments to militarily back the Kurds, yet the Turks see them as a terrorist threat and want to eliminate them. So we're going to have to figure out, are we going to fight the Turks or abandon the Kurds? Oh, well, don't worry about it. We'll worry about that when we get there. That's the attitude. And so within all of this, the danger are the assumptions. And the most dangerous assumption I've heard of late is not just from the Biden administration, but Trump has repeated it, which is that Russia's weak and Iran is weak. And in fact, Iran may be so weak that now's the time that we can launch airstrikes to, quote, take out their nuclear industry so that they can't get a nuclear bomb. And that assumption rests upon the belief that Iran doesn't have any capable air defense system and is incapable of fighting back. And so you have to step back and ask yourself, wonder if that assumption's wrong. That, in fact, Iran has a very capable air defense system and is quite capable of fighting back and inflicting some significant destruction on Israel. Would that change what you're going to do? And that's the problem I see. Nobody's thinking through. They're too busy playing whack-a-mole to figure out how to play chess.
That was well said. There's definitely a this incredible case of incompetence that I guess comes from believing one's own propaganda too much. At a certain point, you just start misstepping left and right and acting like, as you said, a chicken with its head cut off. Which is just a wild situation, considering these are supposed to be the best and the brightest that our education system can produce. But that being said, okay, so we've got a few more people. Rick, I'm going to give you a second chance if you've got your technical difficulties worked out.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, and I see Harley's hand I just noticed went up too. So Harley, actually, I'm going to give it to you first because I'm thinking you might want to say something based on what Larry just said.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I am in general agreement with what Larry said. My point on the plan is that the plan was based on this illusion that characterizes the arrogance of the would-be gods of Olympus, that they can will something and it will happen. Mm-hmm. And when it doesn't happen, they come up with an excuse, an explanation. Putin did something to stop it. You know, the big problem here is that these delusions are reinforced by the media, by the think tanks, by the political parties, by the intelligence community. And as a result, we can comb through things such as RAND Corporation reports or the National Defense Authorization Acts and see all these intentions. And what they generally end up doing is destroying nations, weakening our credibility internationally, and costing us part of our treasure in terms of young people and income, money. So the point is not that they don't have plans, but that their plans almost never work. And I think that's an important point because when it comes to someone like President Trump, the advantage that he has is that he's unpredictable. And we don't know what his actual plan is. We're seeing some of the shaping of it with the appointment of Kellogg and other people in his cabinet. But people claim that they know what Trump is going to do, and I don't think they do. And I think that's actually a useful thing for a president of the United States. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thanks. So let's, Rick, now's finally your time.
Okay, can you hear me?
Combe and then Alberta and Anton. So, Rick, yeah, go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think my internet crapped out last time. So, hi, everybody. It's finally good to be on with Alex Krainer, and been hearing you guys for years, and finally good to be on. I have a question. Red Pill Diaries, Rashid Muhammad, you've been on his show before, right? Some of you have been on his show.
Yeah.
He did a very kind of outbursty, sort of angry, kind of like screaming why, and he seemed to sort of present a strong case that Russia and Iran kind of backstabbed Assad. They kind of left him high and dry, and Iran didn't take him in. But he didn't seem to know why, or didn't seem to present a concise reason why they would do that. Why it would, like, demonstrating that it was not in their strategic interest to do that, to kind of like let off on the protection. Can you guys say anything to that? Why that would be, if that's the case?
Alex, you want to go first?
Alex, you there?
Yes, I was just muted. Yes, okay. It's very difficult for me to judge why things happened the way they happened in Syria, but if we take the 30,000-foot view, then I think it's quite clear that Russia and China and probably Iran and maybe increasingly more nations in the region want to reverse the century or 2 centuries of British geopolitics, which entailed surrounding the pivot area of the Eurasian landmass with an arc of crises, which stretches pretty much all along western and southern borders of Russia, because the British Empire sees the rise of Russia as an existential threat for them. And so, over history, we've had invasions, wars against Finland, Poland, Germany, France, practically all around, all surrounding the pivot area. And this was deliberately engineered so that there are so many, as Mackinder said, bridgeheads. They could be supplied by Western powers, by maritime powers, but if they would fight the pivot power, i.e. Russia or Russia and allies, through proxy armies. And this is what we see happening, the Ukraine war, Syria now, Moldova and Georgia have been designated next proxy armies to tackle Russia and draw it into further wars. We can see that Romania is being prepared for that as well. And I think that the Middle East is also one of those very important bridgeheads. And the whole point of doing this is so that the Western powers retain a hegemony over the Eurasian landmass. And I think that the Russians and the Chinese understand this perfectly well. And I think that rather than them taking the bait and defending this regime or that regime, they are committed to pacifying this whole arc of crises and to recreating a completely different and new, stable security architecture for the whole continent. And I think that part of that, Israel was created also as one of those bridgeheads. As they say, the unsinkable aircraft carrier that has been at war with its neighbors practically nonstop throughout its existence, which has been a consistent element of destabilization in the region. And I think that as far as the new emerging powers are concerned, Israel has got to go. And so one way to get Israel to I personally think that Israel has already been strategically defeated. I think that they scored a Pyrrhic victory in Syria that they will end up overextending themselves and making themselves additionally vulnerable. And I think that perhaps is that the strategy of between Russians and the Iranians, and I'm increasingly inclined to think that the Turks are in on this strategy, is to recreate a different security architecture for the Middle East. Perhaps Turkey is going to have their sphere of influence, and Iran is going to have their sphere of influence, and perhaps Israel will be no longer. And this shouldn't be a big surprise to anybody, in fact, because, it was even Henry Kissinger, who knew a thing or two about the region, who said in 2012 that, quote, 10 years from now, there will be no Israel. It's been more than 10 years, but these are the events that he was anticipated. He he understood that it was coming. So anyway, that's my take on the situation. I think that we will know a lot more as the dust settles, but we already know a lot more now that we knew last Sunday when we learned that Syria fell.
Let me jump in. I'll be actually talking with Rashid tomorrow. I'll try to calm him down. I call him my brother from another mother. He's a passionate man. Let's look at, there are some data points. When they had the BRICS summit, Assad was supposed to attend the BRICS summit. He didn't. There was supposed to be a meeting with Erdogan. Assad refused to meet. We've now heard, and I trust Alistair Crook on this, because Alistair has actually met and been, can talk to most of the principals throughout the area. Both Russia and Iran made overtures to Syria 2 months ago to try to, hey, let's get your army functioning. Let's get them properly paid. Let's, help you get back on your feet. And Assad rejected those offers. And this was taking place at the same time he had been re-invited into the Arab League. So he got to come back into that club, and apparently there was advice being given to him by some other members of the Arab League that maybe he'd be better off if he distanced himself from Iran. We learned something by both Iran and Russia's response here. If this was the United States in Vietnam, we would have doubled down, by God. We would have killed us some more Vietnamese. Russia's not, that's not their thing. They basically said, hey, we're offering our help. You don't want our help? That's fine. Now, but notice there was a massive Western propaganda campaign. Oh, Russia's withdrawing. This is a major defeat. We're running them out of Syria. No, they're still at the air base. They're still at the naval base. And in fact, then the word comes out, HTS is going to the Russians. It was along with the Turks saying, hey, well, will you guys stick around, please? So again, I take everything that comes across the media with maybe 10% of it being right, 90% of it being bullshit. So I think the narrative that they're trying to construct, that Russia and Iran are being run out in their weekend, that goes back to this concept of the assumption I talked about earlier, which is dangerous. Because the reality is people in both the Biden administration, within the Trump camp, and within Israel absolutely believe that. And when you have that kind of false belief, you're going to take actions where you're going to discover, whoops, we made a mistake.
Yep, absolutely. We've got a pretty growing list in the waiting room of people who have a thought to share, a question to ask. Com Carpentier requested to share a thought. Com, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for inviting me to this session. I had basically a question to Alex Krainer, but he has partly answered it, as to when the disintegration of small German banks began. From what I see, it only started under Angela Merkel's rule, if I'm right, but I'd like him to clarify that. Then, of course, I must say in one sentence that I agree with the assessment given by Larry Johnson on what happened in Syria and the fact that it was not possible to save Assad's regime anymore. It was just literally collapsing or on its own, because of all the sanctions and all the other essentially circumstances. And then I have another comment about Larry Johnson's statement regarding the so-called drones in the US and elsewhere. They are not drones. They are all over the world. They are what we now call UAPs. And that is well known. And that's why the government cannot say anything that makes sense, because they'd have to admit there are beings who are far superior and who are here for a very long time and who are now, for some reason, putting very great pressure for a change in the global system. And the US seems to be the primary target. And from what I'm told, there is going to be intensified pressure because of intensified interventions by these craft which have performances that, are similar to the Tic Tacs that were observed and reported in the New York Times. And this is basically now what you might call a invasion of the aerial space of the United States and of other countries as well. I'm getting reports from at least 30 other countries. And we'll see where that leads us, but it seems that it's going to keep increasing. And it's already causing some sort of panic in certain areas of the US, and it's spreading fast. So I will leave you with that.
The other option, of course, being that it is a government-run psyop using drones to drive people crazy, which is another possibility I'm not going to let go of. But for the first elements of what you said, does anybody want to address anything that Com just offered?
Well, let me add that they are far above all the performance characteristics that we can display, that any drones made on this planet can display. They are
I see no evidence of that at all, but okay, sure. Okay.
Yes, I can show there is lots of evidence, and I have seen.
I saw
it,
zero. Okay, all right, Com. Does anybody want to address anything that Com just said? Okay, so since we have a big list here, let's go to the next shot. Anton. Anton, are you there? Konev?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So the interesting thing that I just recently went through the training in the United States Air Force. So the interesting points of the training is the fact that the United States Air Force, to its new military members, is saying that Russia used to be a #1 threat, but that is no longer true. And now it is all about China. And indeed, most of the training currently is all about China, and saying that Russia is no longer considered to be a threat. So that's an interesting thing that I heard a lot about people talking about the past trainings of the United States military, but that is the current inside information of what is happening in the United States military, and they saying that Russia is no longer any threat to the United States, and is no longer #1 target for the future. And when we're talking about the of the dominance of the United States, they always talk about China being the #1 threat. So that's I'd love to hear more from the folks here, because I haven't heard much here today about how Asia and the Chinese government plays into this whole thing, and how they could be part of the future peace solutions. And I'd love to hear from some of the speakers about that.
Yeah, I would too. I would defer on this one for the first answer to Harley. I know has a pretty good handle on the China angle. Harley, you still there?
Yeah. Look, this has been in the works for a while. There have been studies done on how to have a 2 or 3 front war. And what happens when you talk to the people in the military is they say it breaks down every single time. And that China is one of the toughest ones to deal with. But I think this also gets to this question of the planning. Part of the whole plan in Asia was to pull together this thing called the Quad. Bring in Japan, bring in Australia, if possible, bring in South Korea. And look where that's going. The Japanese government collapsed in October. Kishida was run out of office with extremely low popularity. The South Korean government has just been impeached. You know, the idea that you can put together these kinds of military forces to take on a power, whether it's China or even North Korea, is part of the delusion in the so-called military-industrial complex. And, you know, again, this gets back to, I think Larry was talking about reversing geopolitics, or maybe Alex. You know, the intention of the agreements reached between Presidents Putin and Xi Jinping was to create an indivisible security architecture, which could include the West. And this is something that's being ignored in all the discussions in the West, because it's all Russia bad, China bad. And of course, this goes back to Kissinger and his attempt to pit Russia against China. I don't think it's going to work. It didn't even work with India. Blinken went to India to try and talk India to get out of the BRICS, and he was sent with his tail between his legs. So I think, again, they're missing the essential point, which is that the world is changing dramatically, whether it's multipolar or, as Putin recently said, a polyphonic world. It's certainly no longer susceptible to the lure of the unipolar order.
Yeah, let me just add that, again, coming back to the assumptions, I've heard both in the Biden administration and on the Trump side the following: that all they have to do is peel off Russia, because Russia at heart really doesn't like those Chinese. And it recognizes that the real natural allies are the West, who's been trying to kill them all these years. But they'll really come to our side, and that way we can work together and crush the Chinese. Now, you say, oh, Johnson, you're taking hallucinogens again, or, that's crazy. No, they really believe this, guys. I mean, it's absurd. And you've seen it also in the United States with, go back and look when Nixon opened China, and it was for that express purpose of dividing China and Russia, keeping them apart. Don't let them come together, or something bad's going to happen. They might actually take power away from us. And there is a profound failure in the West to understand what has taken place between Russia and China over the course of the last 3 years. Yeah, 4 years ago, they may not have had the warmest, coziest relationship. But they finally, I think, came to realize in the course of this whole Western reaction to Russia trying to fend off NATO, that they said, these people really want to kill us. We better hang together. And as they've hung together, they found that each side brings things to the table. Yeah, China is an industrial power, but I remember my first morning at breakfast in Moscow. I went down to the breakfast room. I thought I was in Beijing. The place was filled with Chinese. And so this relationship between China and Russia is real, and the West refuses to grasp it and think that we can somehow disrupt it.
Alex, do you want to chime in at all, or?
Yes, I
And
wanted
then I see Hall's finger as well. So then I'm going to go to Hall. But yeah, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly, I think that Harley and Larry covered it, and I just wanted to add that I think that from the Chinese and Russian point of view, they understand the way West rolls, and in the same way that Western interests have co-opted and used Ukraine as a battering ram against Russia, they would use Russia as a battering ram against China.
Mm-hmm.
And so their alliance is very existential because they understand this. And today, Russia has these weapon systems and troops that would be a threat to anybody if it was turned against them. So the Chinese have to back the Russians all the way. And the Russians have to stay in that alliance all the way, because look at what happened to Ukraine. They don't care if they waste the whole nation to achieve their goals. And I think that they would be perfectly willing to completely destroy Russia to use it to destroy China. And so I think that this is perfectly clear to the leadership in both nations, which is why all these fantasies about somehow seducing Russia to let go of this alliance and to throw their lot with the West once more is a delusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I believe it was Zbigniew Brzezinski who had said back in 1997 that the only thing that could possibly challenge the end of history model at this point would be a very unlikely but possible alliance between Russia, China, and Iran. And that would probably not happen. That being said, the Straussians he groomed and brought into play back in the 70s, who got back into power in 2000, I think didn't take his remarks seriously enough. And now they finally are, and I think are desperate to try to go back in time with their imaginary time machine to undo what exists now as
But
this alliance for survival.
Just quickly, isn't it absolutely astonishing how phenomenally effective they have been at achieving opposite outcomes and unintended consequences? I mean, it's just like been one slam dunk after another, one own goal after another. They were like this alliance between China and Russia was the last thing that was supposed to happen. They made it happen.
Yeah, the hubris factor. Just has a lot of blowback. Hall, yes, I see you there. So what are your thoughts, Hall?
Yeah, I wanted to chirp in on this one. Russia and China have been coming together. They threatened to come together as soon as NATO, or Russia threatened to move closer to China as soon as NATO announced it would expand in 1997. I have a quote, I have a video, I could send it to everybody about Biden saying this was impossible. Russia and China will never come together, and Russia and Iran, you're joking. It's a really amazing video. I think it's not a deep fake. So so that's the first point. The war over Kosovo in 1999, definitely, they both realized they had to build up their military capabilities if they weren't going to be blasted to hell by NATO's superior military capabilities. So they began to at least separately build up themselves behind the scenes during the global war on terrorism. So this process has been going on, but the U.S. has been in a state of denial that Russia, China, Iran, plus North Korea were moving step by step closer together. Now, what's interesting here is now, realizing this, Biden has apparently sent out some sort of memo saying that the agencies have to be restructured to understand why Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran are coming closer together. So that's apparently the new thing, and whether or not these memos and they're restructuring the agencies will be accepted by Trump or not, it's not clear. But certainly, finally, after all these years, the administration, Biden himself, is realizing that this is a reality. And nuclear planning is now aimed for the first time at Russia, China, and North Korea, that they fight simultaneously. So that's the first point. But the next point is Trump, and I think rightly so, is suggesting that the way to peace is through China. And therefore, but that's the problem with that is it changes his whole anti-China strategy from the beginning. So to what extent can China be involved in this as a peacemaker? It's tried to make peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's promised to negotiate in the Palestinian-Israeli question, and it's often made offers for peace with Russia and Ukraine. So my question is, what do you think? Is Russia and China going to come together backing up Iran in a military sense, or is it possible for Trump to kind of negotiate between this and try to find working with China to try to ameliorate this crisis, which is getting more and more dangerous every day? Anyway, however you want to respond to that, it's fine with me.
Well, I'd point out that Russia, China, and Iran have been carrying out joint naval military exercises for the last 5 years. And the fact that they started 5 years ago means that the planning for that, those exercises don't just happen with people calling each other up on the phone and saying, hey, let's get together next week and exercise. No, usually it's a minimum of about an 18-month planning process. So just backdate it from the very first time that they actually went to sea and worked together. 18 months prior to that, senior Iranian, Russian, Chinese military officials were sitting down and planning, how are we going to work together? How are we going to integrate? Then reportedly on January 25th, Russia and Iran are going to sign a mutual defense pact. So I don't think this is temporary. I don't think this is going away. And also let's note that Russia was very quick to provide Iran with air defense systems electronic warfare capabilities that were used to turn away Israel's attempted attack on October 1st.
If I could just add one point to that, the idea that the Russians don't know about these reports on three-front wars, the shifting U.S. nuclear doctrine, they just assume the Russians are either stupid or that they can fool them. But the idea that the Russians are going to be caught off guard by these brilliant analysts, whether it's Blinken or the Brzezinski crowd, is part of the delusion and part of the arrogance. And I think we're going to pay for that in a big way in the future, because the United States is losing its credibility internationally. And this is something that's going to, I think, worsen over time.
Yep, I agree.
Alex, you want to chime in on that, or are you satisfied?
Yeah, and I generally agree with everything. I've myself witnessed many times just simply dismaying arrogance and even kind of racism with respect to Russians when the SMO started almost 3 years ago. People were talking about like, oh, Russians are not capable of thinking strategically, and the quip was, oh, Spassky couldn't beat Bobby Fischer, so there you go. We in the West are superior. Russians generally respond to stimuli, they eat, sleep, and fornicate, and that's about all they're good for. But that's the kind of thinking that in the end gets you to underestimate your enemy, and then when you get a punch in the face, then you wonder how that happened. Well, we had it coming.
Just a quick footnote to that on this question of racism. If people have never seen it before, Keir Giles, who's the key Russophobe at the Chatham House, has written several books on this, where he basically says the Russians instinctively lie and cheat and don't trust each other. And that's where you see the racism directed toward Russia as well as other countries.
Yeah, one of the what's the guy in U.S. intelligence who repeated that same thing, that Russians are genetically driven to lie and manipulate. Wasn't
the
Brennan
NSC
the other
director? Yeah, the
name?
Russiagate guy.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I can't come up with his name. That's okay.
Yeah, there's certainly a little bit of an echo residues of the from some people who might have read Mein Kampf and taken some strange lessons about Slavic Untermenschen a little bit too seriously and held on to that. But yeah, there's definitely pervasive racism, including for the Chinese too. They've got these overgeneralizations that they just impose onto the psyche of an entire people and then make policy around these oversimplistic generalizations, which result in all sorts of blind spots left and right, and an underappreciation for what reality actually is right in front of their face.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
in fact, Mackinder, when he wrote about the possibility that China might be one of the nations who could become the pivot power, he said, yes, conceivably, but only if they were managed by the Japanese. Like if the Japanese were in charge and then used the Chinese as the cannon fodder and the labor force, then maybe, but otherwise no, because the Chinese were too inferior to pull that one off.
All right, we have Jacob and Bruce, who I'm seeing have been waiting for a while. So Jacob in Alberta.
Hello there. Can you guys hear me?
Sure.
Oh, good. Yeah, so I am Jacob with the Alberta Monetary Authority and Cree Energy, Oil and Gas. Little quick story about Alberta here, and I was very excited to hear about the land bridge. I've been researching for the last 14 years about Premier William Eberhart and the Alberta Oil and how big of a scam that is when Bechtel came and built the Suncor and Syncrude and all this stuff. Anyways, I've been reaching out for, 3-4 years. I've even written Putin a letter trying to get some understanding between what's happening over there and what's happening over here. So I do want to build a bridge with Canada's indigenous oil and gas companies. A lot of people are under the misunderstanding that Indians are allowed to get into the oil and gas industry, and that's not true. The only thing that Indians in the Western Canada can do is build casinos and low-paying jobs and solar panel farms, which are financed for 25 years, and the solar panels only last for 9 or 10 years. So that's putting us in a lurch. So this network, Matt, I really appreciate you putting together, and Larry and Ed, I've been following you guys for a while. So really quickly, I have stories for the last 14 years. I've been working with Cree Energy. Go ahead.
Yeah, just so you know, we have to keep it a little bit short, though. So if you be concise.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's what I'm trying to do. Thank you, Matt. Just basically the long and the short is I am reaching out to China, to Russia. We have been embargoed. We have pitched hundreds and hundreds of deals. We have a whole bunch of lands available in crude oil and gas. So I just want to get that word out there. If anybody wants, they can contact me at jacob.hiller@creeenergy.ca. And if anything arises of this, I just mention Matt because I would love to benefit Matt and help out with this providing funding should we ever flow oil, for the journalism aspect of getting this message out. Go ahead, Matt. I'm finished.
No, it's definitely important, and we will be hosting in the new year a roundtable focusing on the Arctic as a geostrategic platform for war cooperation, with a lot of space for the types of opportunities. So your feedback is going to be useful in planning that out, and I do look forward to continuing that discussion. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, and definitely as well your interactions with the Cree communities is something I'm fascinated with. So yeah, we'll keep a dialogue going there. Okay, Bruce, and you've been waiting for a bit. Bruce, you still there?
Yes, I sure am. At the very top of the chat, I dropped the link for Alex Krainer's recent piece on his Substack, Syria, Will It Be the Final Quagmire of the Empire? I recommend that, most highly germane to much that has been discussed here. And regarding consolidation, Germany and in America, I want to mention two folks who can be followed on Facebook, and I recommend them. Julianne Romanello, and also Cindy Niles, Niles. And question for Larry Johnson: where do you steer people to find and follow you on the internet, sir?
Sonar21.com. I just, by the way, I posted a recent interview I did with a fellow named Alex Krainer. Guy was remarkably intelligent. Had some very salient things to say.
Not surprised at all.
The checks are on the way as a
over and out.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, so let's go to Ken, and then we might have to wrap it up. So maybe people might have a final thought or two they might want to share the main speakers. But Ken, you got in last as the last speaker, last questioner. So go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I basically just wanted to second what the previous speaker had said about Alex Krainer. He's kind of like the man of the hour. A lot of people are commenting on his piece. And I was wondering if he could just speak a little bit to his speculation about the Syria thing being a sort of a set trap for the West, because I think it's just an incredible speculation, and it does seem to line up with many of the facts that we know about how easily Syria was conquered. So if he could speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
Can you ask me a very specific question, because I don't want to take too much time you know.
Is it still? Do you still hold to the speculation that the Syrian debacle could have been a preset trap for the West by Russia at all?
Yes, I do. I'll confess I don't know what nature of the trap this would be, but it is clear that whoever launched this incursion from Idlib, whoever was behind it, and however it did happen, there's a lot of information about, it was supposed to be launched in March, and then it was brought forward. There were advanced discussion between the Arab states and Assad. Erdogan panicked over this because this was complicating his relation with the Kurds and American proxy forces in Kurdistan. So he panicked, but I'm not sure that that's the case, because maybe he was in cahoots with the Russians and the Iranians. I don't know exactly what's going on and how it's going on, but the fact that the Syrian army folded in 11 days, the same army, same Bashar al-Assad, who fought for 4 years a bigger attack at a difficult moment in their history between 2011 and 2015, at the time while we still thought that the United States was this overpowering, invincible force. We haven't seen Russia fight in the Ukraine. We haven't seen the hypersonic missiles either from Russia or from Iran or from the Houthis. So it looked hopeless, yet they fought. And here they folded in 11 days. And then there was a lot of rhetoric and narratives about why they folded, and none of it made sense to me, because, I was at war, very badly paid. It didn't matter, you're in an army, you're in a uniform, you get your orders and you go and you do it. That's how it works. If low pay and corrupt commanders were any factor, then Ukraine wouldn't have an army at all.
Yeah.
Yet they're still there and they're still fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And so that none of them made any sense to me. There had to have been orders to stand down and disband. That's the only way you can explain that a 270,000 strong army just vanishes. And so now, information is dripping in, which are, I think I just heard a fellow named Larry Johnson, an extraordinarily capable analyst, talk about the fact that Bashar al-Assad's brother took a whole tank division across the border to Iraq, if I didn't misunderstand.
Correct.
And that the Russians took out of Syria not only Bashar al-Assad, but one of their top generals, or maybe the top general of the Syrian army. So, where are these 270,000 troops? They didn't vaporize. They're somewhere. Some of them got killed, but not all 270,000 of them. That can't be done in 11 days either. So I think it's a trap. I think that what it has achieved is it throws Syria into kind of chaos. It possibly draws Western powers to throw more and more assets into it to try to secure it. There's also the lure of pulling that pipeline from Qatar across Turkey to the west. So they will try hard to secure that. Israel is now, quite vulnerable from the northeast. So they will, send troops to try to take control of as much Syrian territory as possible. I don't know what effect that might have on Jordan, but Jordan's teetering. And so I think that maybe somebody at some level judged that this would be an advantageous way to destroy your enemy rather than go into a frontal conflict and then bleeding and destroying your troops and your military assets in a fight that ultimately weakens everybody. So
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I hope that we can continue this thread in the near future, because I think it's really spot on. I don't see any other way to explain events.
Yeah.
Would Harley or Larry, do you guys want to chime in on this specific topic before we do the final remarks?
No, I generally agree with Alex that this is, the Russians, whether this was pre-planned or as they saw it unfolding, they said, okay, we've got a course of action, stick in here, bleed ourselves out some, or pull out and let the West bleed itself. I think clearly the West is in the position now. They've got to manage this chaos, and trying to sort out Turks versus Kurds. That's just one of the issues. You've got a 75% Sunni population in Syria that are inclined, will be favorable to this ISIS vision of a caliphate. Not all, but it's still there. And to pretend that that's just something we can manage, the West has never been able to manage that. So I think ultimately this will be seen as a smart strategic move by Russia, not a sign of weakness.
I hope you're right. Harley, did you want to chime in on this topic before the final thought?
Well, I actually wanted to bring something up from earlier, Alex's talk about Germany, which I think was quite important. People probably know there's going to be a no confidence vote in the German Bundestag this week, and it's likely that it's going to end the Scholz government, which literally ended itself some months ago with the crazy green policy, with Lindner cutting the budget. There's no support for the three leading parties. Now, the two interesting points. One, the likely victor in the election, which will take place on February 23rd, will be Friedrich Merz of the Christian Democrats. And who is Merz? He's the former European director of BlackRock. So, the Germans are just beginning to find out about that. And the opposition parties are saying a vote for Merz is a vote for BlackRock. So let's see if that holds up. But the other interesting thing, if you look at what happened with the Trump election, if you look at what's happening across Europe, there are new alliances that are being forged. And the most interesting potential in Germany is the so-called right-wing extremist Alternative for Deutschland and the so-called left-wing Sarah Wagenknecht group. What do they have in common? Against the war in Ukraine, against the green policy. And both of them now are putting out pieces on how Germany should be a bridge to Eurasia for Western Europe and the United States. And in particular, peace with Russia and trading with China. Whereas the European Union is doing everything it can to destroy the relationship of European countries with China, as it already has with Russia. So this is going to be something to keep an eye on in the months ahead. I don't know if it's going to come up between now and February 23rd election, but I do know that there are people there who are intently focused on the political situation in the United States and hoping they can pull something off in Germany, which would bring together the so-called working class and the middle class, which coincides with this, what Alex was talking about with the small and medium enterprises that have been destroyed by the green policy and the war policy.
And Harley, also by the ECB's deliberate policy of destroying small and medium-sized banks. According to Richard Werner, they have so far managed to destroy over 6,000 small and medium-sized banks across Europe.
And that's the policy of Mario Draghi, who's long
Yes.
functioned as an operative for the Bank of England.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's very, very, very ominous. And I know Draghi's former associate Mark Carney also is being situated to replace Justin Trudeau in Canada as well, as the next phase of the crisis sets in. They want these vicious technocrats to be in a position of as much control as they can. So extremely important to have this recollection of what a sane financial practice was that built up our industrial power to begin with this look towards this politically, economically strong sense of our history and the battle against oligarchism. I think this is very important that people engage in that exercise right now because we really need it. And I think that the leadership of Russia, China especially, have a much better grasp of the deeper waves of history than a lot of Westerners do. So I'm glad that these forums are happening. Larry, did you want to chime in on your parting thoughts before we end for the new year?
I think the next 36 days will be very dangerous until Trump comes in, and then we'll probably enter a new phase of danger. But right now, the Biden administration seems intent on trying to set the world on fire, and they're not taking any steps at all to try to contain. They're trying to make it more dangerous. So it's a very volatile time.
Yep. Ed?
Okay, well, I think what Larry just said, it's when I started my speech at the beginning, I also mentioned about 36 days, which we have to pray that nothing happens. Every time we wake up in the morning, we say, thank God that it's still around. But I want to say that it's really inspirational, and this gloom and doom atmosphere, being part of this group, it's a great honor. And I want to wish everyone Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and next year, I think we will be with this Pluralia Eurasian, as Larry, you mentioned Eurasia, right? In Germany, to Eurasia, this is a really great link. And there are many people in Germany who I know personally who really want to just be this bridge between the United States, between the West. This will be great. Actually, Ukraine. Actually, I was born in Ukraine and speak fluently, and I finished high school. Ukraine had a great future in '91. Great future. The only thing is, if NATO, if it will declare neutral status, it will be one of the most prosperous countries in Europe. And all those who committed this horrible crime by pushing Ukraine into NATO, but orchestrating this 2014 coup, Biden is part of this gang. Good leaving stage. I hope that on January 21, Trump will pick the phone, call Putin. They will meet somewhere, maybe in Hungary, because Orban probably would welcome this meeting. Because it has to be face to face. It cannot be just online conversation. So we have to wait for January 21. Pray, and then meet again next year. Matt will, of course, send us a link, but maybe at this time it will be empowered by Pluralia Eurasian Economic Forum, and this will be in much better shape. Happy holidays.